For years, we have heard the same story. Millennials were taking over the housing market. Gen Z was coming next. Baby boomers were slowing down, they're retiring. But according to the latest National Association of Realtors generational trends report, that's actually not what's happening at all. In fact, baby boomers now make up the largest group of homebuyers in America. And at that same time, first time homebuyers have fallen to the lowest level ever recorded. So, what does that mean if you're trying to buy your first home in Denver in 2026? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be breaking down in a brand new episode of the Pursuit of Progress podcast today. Here with my co host, Ben. Ben, what's up, dude?
Hey, so glad to be here. Thank you for having me on again. And you know what? This is a conversation that we need to have because affordability right now in Denver, in a lot of parts of the country, in a lot of big cities, it's a really big concern. And I want to start off just by saying and acknowledging that the American dream isn't dead. There are people online, social media that act like it is dead and they act like home ownership is impossible. It's not. It's just getting delayed. But at the same time, there are some real hurdles. One of the most shocking statistics from that same report is that first-time home buyers now make up only 21% of home purchases, which is the lowest level ever recorded. And listen to this, the average first-time home buyer is now over 40 years old. A generation ago, people bought homes in their 20s. Today, many people are waiting until their 30s or early 40s. And I remember 20 years ago, that's right. I mean, the average first time homebuyer age at that time was somewhere in the 20s, and it's kind of just been gradually creeping up ever since. And so I just want people to know that it's not dead. You have to be more intentional. You have to be more focused. You have to put a plan together, and you have to know what your resources are. I'd love to get kind of your take on what you're seeing on the real estate side of things and how you're feeling about this affordability crisis.
Yeah, man, I think it's just one of those scenarios that, I think success or just people that are able to still win in the real estate market today are the ones that are willing to kind of think outside the box. They're willing to adapt, maybe, turn directions, figure out new ways to still succeed. And like you said, it's not dead, it's just getting delayed. And a lot of that comes down to just a preparation, just the ability for buyers to have that longer term vision and really sticking to it and making sure
Yeah.
that they're very structured with their saving and they're not you know saving money for 3 or 4 years and then spending it all on a big vacation. They're being very consistent with their long term strategy. I think that's the key there, is just that long term. And I think with Denver specifically, one of the big challenges is just how we had that period of time with right after COVID, 2019, 2020 through about 2022, where we saw massive appreciation with
Mhm.
Denver real estate, and that only further put a lot of these first time home buyers just really priced out of the entire ability to buy homes. What about you, man? What are you feeling on the real estate, or maybe a little bit more on the mortgage side?
I'm feeling the same way, just the economy in general. I think that the way our economy has evolved, we're obviously very consumer focused. We have a consumer driven economy where the individual consumer from consumer spending makes up two-thirds of our economy. And so that's how all of us have been trained. Now, 20 years ago, it wasn't that big of a concern because inflation had not gotten out of control. When I look at the home that my mom bought in Wheat Ridge, she bought that for around 130,000 as a single mom working part time as a nurse. And she was able to get qualified. She was able to purchase it. She was able to put the down payment down, afford the mortgage payment. And I mean, let's just be honest. That you're not going to be able to do that in 2026, but it doesn't mean that homeownership isn't possible. It just means that you need better planning. You need to know what your options are. You need to be more intentional. And
Hmm.
that's really where I think that we're headed. And it's a little bit unfair for folks that are in some of these younger generations, millennials and Gen Z, because I do think that they have had there are more challenges that these generations have had compared to older generations, but there's also more opportunities. And it's the second half of the conversation that a lot of time gets left off. When you think about all the different ways to earn online, social media, being a creator, having an online business, there are so many more ways now to create income than there were 20 or 30 years ago. When it comes to qualifying and tackling some of these affordability issues, there's never been more options. And that's the second part of the conversation that a lot of time gets left out. So me as a lender, I'm acknowledging what those hurdles are. Yes, interest rates are higher than what they were 4 or 5 years ago. Home values are higher. Property taxes, homeowners insurance have all gone up. Yes, that is true, and it affects affordability. But there are loan programs out there right now where you can get $25,000 in down payment assistance. Buyers have never had more leverage in the last 25 years than they do right now. There are ways to structure the financing to buy the interest rate down or get all the closing costs paid for or to do something like a temporary buy down on top of down payment assistance to make it affordable. But you have to know what your options and resources are. And that is why it's so important to be as intentional as you can be and get connected with the right people.
Hmm. Yeah, I'd like to just kind of dig into this report a little bit more and talk about the baby boomers. So, I don't know why, I don't know if any other people that are on the podcast listening to us today have the same issue that I do, but I don't know why I have the hardest time remembering, what's a Gen Z, what's millennial, what's a baby boomer. So, for any of you guys that are kind of like me and have a hard time with that, the baby boomers that we're talking about right now, that was people that were born from 1946 to 1964. So, right now, the
Yeah.
people that are baby boomers are between 62 and 80 years old. And I bring that up because I think that was one of the biggest surprises in the report is how baby boomers now account for roughly 42% of all buyers specifically. So that's because they have something that younger generations don't, which is equity. So many of these baby boomers, they've owned homes for 20, maybe even 30 years, and those homes have appreciated tremendously. And now they're using that equity to, downsize, relocate, retire. Again, thinking about somebody that's 62 as an example, they are at an age where a lot of people that are at that age in their life, they probably have kids that are just graduating high school, maybe a little bit past that. But at that point, again, to buy maybe closer to their family, maybe it's even a second home, all that kind of stuff. So, just making the point that baby boomers are really the ones that are shaking things up at the moment. Have you been noticing that at all with just the loan applications you're receiving? And um, I'm guessing that a lot of the baby boomers are also probably the ones that are using more cash for their purchases. Maybe not quite
Yeah.
frequent of customers for you.
A lot of the first time home buyers that I'm working with are 40 years and younger. And I love one of the niches that I've created for myself is I'm an expert when it comes to first time home buyers and down payment assistance, affordable housing loans. And so I do get the opportunity to work with a lot of first time home buyers, and that's such an incredible privilege. But you're right though. When it comes to baby boomers, they just have more resources because they're further along in their careers, and a lot of times they're homeowners already, and if you've owned your home for the last 10, 15, or 20 years, there's more than likely going to be a substantial amount of equity. So the baby boomers that I have worked with, I worked with a couple that were selling their home in Arvada, had a very small mortgage in that, hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity, and they sold that property and then ended up purchasing in Weld County, which is where their daughter and their grandkids were, to be closer to them. So even though the interest rate was going to be higher on their new mortgage because interest rates are higher, the fact that they were able to purchase and put such a large down payment down, the fact that homes are a little bit less expensive, it's just finding something that makes sense for you. And so, to your point, there are ways to make responsible, informed, powerful financial decisions, whether you're a first time home buyer or a baby boomer.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really inspiring just to hear that, it's possible for everybody, it's not just, one segment of the population right now. There's still ways to succeed. Like you said, if you're a first time home buyer, there's all kinds of grants, a lot of just different opportunities that most people don't even know exist. So maybe if we're speaking your language, you guys, on that specific point, reach out to Ben. He's the expert at that. And he's really, really good with getting creative on how to make things still, work out and you can still win. So little plug there, but definitely, reach out to him if you have specific questions about that. Um, Ben,
Yeah,
why
I
don't you just
appreciate that, Adam. Thank you.
share a little bit more now about like the first time home buyers and the mistakes that they're making? Because,
Yeah.
that's important to kind of talk through as well.
I think one of the biggest mistakes that first time homebuyers make is they disqualify themselves without ever being able to make an informed financial decision. And so, what I mean by that is they take market generalities. Interest rates are too high, your home values are too high. I need to wait till values start to come down or the market crashes. And they don't understand what is available right now. Now, of course, I'm a proponent of home ownership. I believe in the American dream, but I also believe in the individual prospective home buyer doing what's in their best financial interest. I'm never going to, pressure someone or tell someone that they need to go buy. You need to do what is best for you and for your family. Um, my suggestion, though, is let's see what your options are. Let's see what you qualify for, because more than likely, you are going to qualify for some type of financial incentive if you are a first time home buyer. And a lot of these first time home buyer programs are very flexible with credit. We have over 21 different down payment assistance, reduced down payment, minimum down payment programs at the bank that I work for in North Point. Credit scores are very flexible. We can go all the way down to 620. A lot of these, especially in Denver, because Denver is a high price market, have very high income limits. And you can get down payment assistance in some cases up to over $25,000, depending on uh, your loan size, what loan programs you qualify for. So there's a lot of opportunities out there. And there's also specific strategies where you can structure the loan financing in a certain way to get the payment down even lower, to buy the interest rate down even further. I was able to close on a first time home buyer program through Chafa. They have a program called First Generation. You get $25,000 in down payment assistance, regardless of the loan size, if you are a first time home buyer and your parents have never owned a home. So this individual was able to get $25,000 from Chafa through their first generation loan program. And then it also allows for interest rate buy down. So the agent was able to get a seller credit from the seller to then allow the buyer to buy the interest rate all the way into the mid fives on top of $25,000 in down payment assistance. And so, had that individual not called me and discussed that, she would have never known that was even an option or a possibility. But she made the call and she decided to apply.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, very inspiring. I think, the quote that we were talking about earlier, the best time to prepare to buy a home isn't when the market changes, it's before it changes. And that's a good example of that. Just knowing what the options are today for
Mhm.
months from now when it is the time that you're considering buying a home. So that's really good advice. Um, I'd like to talk maybe now just about a point that we put together about just what Denver buyers really need to focus on in 2026. And if you guys are listening to this here in Denver, this is what I personally would recommend focusing on: four things. So, number one is just really understanding, like Ben's saying, about being financially ready whenever it makes the most sense for you, not just a blanket statement that it's the right time for everybody or nobody. It's always when it makes the
Mhm.
most sense financially for you. Not Zillow ready, not HGTV ready, but
Yeah.
financially ready. That's the key there. And then also the second one is to stop comparing your chapter one to somebody else's chapter 20. Many people that
Yeah.
you're competing with have, 20 years of equity, inheritance, maybe stock gains or different other, forms of additional assets, maybe even previous home sales. Don't worry about any of that stuff. Just focus on your own path. It's really, really important. And then also, just like we're talking about for this entire episode, just getting educated now, not waiting, just still focusing today on education, because the buyers who win are not the smartest, they're the most prepared. And then, last but not least, just really understanding again about how important it is to have a plan. Get a plan, not a wish, a plan, and specific savings goals, specific timelines, specific price range, specific, next steps when it comes to what you need to do next month to get a little bit closer to being prepared when that time comes.
Yeah, and let's acknowledge this can be intimidating. There
Very
are
much so.
challenges, there is adversity, and making that jump and that plunge into homeownership, it can be a little bit scary. I remember when I moved back to Applewood and Denver, Colorado from Phoenix. I was born and raised in Denver, as you know. Went to high school in Denver, went to the University of Colorado in Boulder, but then I left, moved to Arizona for 10 years, lived in Phoenix. And when I came back, in 2015. Well, at that time, Denver real estate had already appreciated substantially. And with where property values still were in Arizona, I was having to pay two or three times in Denver what I had just sold my home for back in Phoenix. And so it was very intimidating. I was asking myself, can I do this? Am I making the right decision? Can I afford this payment? But looking back 10 years later, some of the things that you just mentioned, the market has done a lot of the heavy lifting. I've paid that mortgage balance down every single month, but now the home is appreciated. It's really doubled in value. And so now all of a sudden there's this substantial amount of equity. But the reason I have that though is because I decided to get in the game back in Phoenix when I only had a couple of $1,000s to put down on a home, sold that, and then moved it over to Denver. And so when you have that long-term mindset and that belief, it helps tackle some of those concerns and those adversities and some of the fear that you might have. And that's kind of where I want to go with this, where it's kind of the opportunity that no one is talking about. And this is the encouraging news that the harder homeownership becomes, the more valuable it becomes because fewer people are willing to do what it takes.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, every single generation has had their own set of obstacles, whether it's high
Yeah.
inflation, high interest rates. I mean, we have stories of our parents' generation of, 16% interest rates,
Mhm.
recession, housing crashes. There's a lot of different things that have happened just in the last, 10 years, much less the last 30. So, the one though consistent thing with all of these different, obstacles is there's still been a ton of homeowners that continued to build wealth. The
Yeah.
path can change, but the principle does not, and that's just important. Um, it's not timing the market; it's time in the market. I know that's one of your favorite things to say, and it just holds a lot
Yeah.
of value when you apply it to what we're talking about today.
Because most people have the mindset where I need to time the market. I need to wait until the perfect time to buy. But when you have the philosophy that it's not timing the market, it's time in the market, then timing the market matters much less. Now, of course, you're going to be aware of what's happening and where interest rates are at and what the economic outlook is like. You want to be aware of those things. But one of the questions that I ask my prospective home buyers when they're making some of these decisions, do you see yourself being a homeowner 10 years from now? Would you like that? Do you see yourself being a homeowner 5 years from now? Do you see yourself being a homeowner from 3 years from now? Well, if you see yourself being a homeowner long term and that's your belief, then you wanna become a homeowner as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think I don't have this in front of me. I might butcher this, but just to kind of really hit this home, talking again about the average net worth of a renter versus a homeowner, and all of that has to do again with just that equity, that time in the market that has built up
Yeah.
their net worth, and it's something crazy like the average net worth of a renter is, I was going to say 8,000, but I think it's even less than that, right? It's
It's low. Yeah, I mean, it's very low.
yeah, like under five, like 5 grand, let's just say, and the average net worth of a homeowner is like over 400,000. And again, that's
Several
all.
100,000, yeah.
Yeah, it's all based off of just time in the market and building up that equity and letting the appreciation of the home really carry your net worth up significantly.
And
Really,
it's just
really,
because they made one decision and they made the decision to buy. And this is also another Warren Buffett, philosophy, and it's not something that gets touched on or talked on nearly as much. But when you're talking about mortgage payments, yes, property taxes and homeowners insurance can go up and down, but I'm talking about the actual mortgage payment, the principal and interest. When you're on a 30-year fixed rate loan and that interest rate and that payment is not going to change, in real dollars, that payment erodes every single year because of inflation. And so most people talk about inflation as being a bad thing. Well, when you're a homeowner and you own assets, it's actually a good thing because that means that your property value is going to go up. It means that your income is going to rise. And so if you're paying $2,000 a month 10 years ago compared to $2,000 a month in 2026, that's going to be a much smaller percentage of your pay compared to what it was 10 years ago. And so that mortgage payment relative to your income is going to get less and less and less. Where when you rent, even though rent might be more favorable in the short term, well, that rent is always going to go up.
hmm absolutely, yeah. 10 years from now, your rent is going to be probably double, if not triple, what it is today, and that mortgage payment's still going to be the exact same amount it is today.
Yeah,
Yep.
as long as you make responsible decisions and you don't re-leverage or cash out or do something crazy. But so where are we going with all of this? What's the big takeaway from this podcast today? The housing market is changing. Demographics are changing. The average buyer is changing. The average first-time home buyer is changing. But the opportunity is still there. If you're a future homeowner in Denver, stop asking, "Can I buy a home?" and start asking, what do I need to do to become the person who can? Because that is the question that's going to change everything. I want to thank you guys again for another episode of the Pursuit of Progress podcast. For Adam Lang, this is Benjamin Adams. We'll see you guys next week. And as a reminder, if you're thinking about buying a home in Denver in 2026, grab our free buyer resources at adamsellsdenver.com and join us on one of our live upcoming home buyer masterclasses. And we actually have one starting right now in about 15 minutes. So we hope to see you guys there. God bless.
See you guys.